Hi, everyone. Welcome to our finale episode of You Make Us, a place where we celebrate and highlight the members and builders of Unlock community. Today, we have somebody who's been with us for years and giving us support and using Unlock on a daily basis. I invite Will. Hi, Will. Welcome.
Hi, Anupa. How's it going?
Great. I'm so excited to chat with you today. And as our finale guest, I'm sure that'll be super, super exciting and special.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it too.
Yeah. So, one of my first questions, it's standard. I ask everybody, what is your story as a founder, or where did this whole thing for you start?
Yeah, so my story as a founder is, well, they say mother or necessity is the mother of invention, right? So,
Yeah.
back in 2022, I had a consulting opportunity that I was working on. I'm bringing a Web2 financial product into the Web3 world, and that opportunity essentially dried up. So I knew that I had to kind of make my own way. And so that's when I started off on a journey of true entrepreneurship and became the founder of Restriction KF Media right up here, wherever it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's my story in a nutshell. It was driven by necessity, but it was also driven by passion because I know that if I wanted to leverage the blockchain technology, it had to be something special. And so we started on this track back in August of 2022 of what does social impact look like? What does it mean? And how can we leverage education in a way, combining it with blockchain technology to make meaningful impact?
Okay. And on your entrepreneurship journey, what was the problem or the challenge that you saw that you were trying to solve, where this idea of KF Media comes in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the solution we're providing is a stark contrast to how the traditional education system works within our society, right? And we went on a journey in 2022 to have hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversations with traditional educators, online educators, ed tech educators, and homeschool teachers alike. And one commonality that we found through that entire interview process was how the current educational construct was not serving the learners to maximize the benefit of the learning experience, right? It's become very institutionalized, as you probably already know.
Yeah.
It can have considerable expense depending on what you want to learn. So, in building KF Media, the original concept was we can do this independently outside of that construct, and we can build a model that is completely different from that, where education not only becomes regenerative in and of itself, but where we can make the model more equitable and accessible on a global scale.
And you're very, very correct. Is that today education? I think knowledge building is a part of a component of education, but there are a lot of other
100%.
peripheral, I wouldn't say necessities or boundaries, but needs that are cropping up. And, when you see KF Media building, that intersection between knowledge, education, Web3, I think there is a lot that can be done. And when you had this vision, like what was the kind of conversations were you having with, let's say, educators or even parents? Because that's the kind of deciding factor also, that plays into a conversation like that. What was their response?
Yeah, so primarily we're having the conversations with the educators themselves, not really parents necessarily,
Okay.
because when we started off on this journey just about 3 years ago, or just a little over 3 years ago, we were focused on more the adult learners, right?
Okay.
And so because those were the people that we were surrounded by within our network were adult learners, and how could we do better for the adult learners? Also, because prior to that, part of my initial journey into the blockchain ecosystem was getting an education about how the institutionalized financial systems operated and how they worked, and understanding that at least in the United States, we're facing a very serious epidemic in terms of consumer debt. And one of the top categories in consumer debt is student debt,
Yeah.
meaning that most of the adult learners that go to higher learning institutions create oftentimes unsurmountable debt that they'll never be able to repay, essentially, because there's not qualified career opportunities in their field of study waiting for them at the end of their course, right? When they complete their degree, there's not necessarily, unless it's highly specialized, right? I mean, like a highly specialized field, say like a neurosurgeon, maybe
Yeah.
there's those opportunities. But if you're talking about, somebody who wants to become a lawyer, well, there may not be a qualified opportunity for them once they get their degree.
Yeah, and that's a global phenomenon. In
It
India,
is.
lawyers don't have that problem, but design, you know, either we have people going overseas to study where that loan is, phenomenal. They go there, their immigration is scrapped, they come back, or even like, let's say, a lot of the private colleges in India, there is a huge, debt. And I think it's great that you're, looking at a scope like this. So, I mean, you've been exploring unlock in ways that obviously have a lot of meaning in your use cases. um what
Mhm.
is it that made you like look at this infrastructure for such an operation that had access, that had immutability, and other kind of blockchain related facets?
Yeah, so I think to answer your question, to provide a little context and background about my first experiences with Unlock, the basically the outputs of the Unlock protocol. We'll start there. So my first experiences was during Gitcoin grants rounds, where we'd have operators of their focus of their project, their passion, whatever it was that they were fundraising against. And after the rounds would close, because they couldn't incentivize people to give more during these rounds. Um, they would send out like a welcome or like a thank you, like an appreciation gift, which ended up being an unlock lock, right? Part of the protocol. I didn't really understand how the protocol worked until I was able to sit down and have some at length conversations with one of the members of the community who understood, because they worked in the DevRel function, so developer relations function before, and they had understood every nuance and every mechanism that went into the smart contracts. And then after that, just utilization on a consistent basis and pushing the capabilities of the protocol of like what's possible versus what's not possible, and asking questions about, hey, I have this idea, is this possible to use unlock for? And if it's like no, but there's other ways to go about doing it, then that's fine. So I think having a firm understanding of what the capabilities of the protocol are versus what it's not capable of is a good place to ground people so that they can understand how they can customize it to fit their needs.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things about Unlock, is that its use cases are so varied and versatile, whether it is education, certification, supply chain, digital assets. It just keeps, multiplying, because, you can take it wherever you go. You can add your own data, and that there is this level of security that, makes access so much easier. um what other in this whole educational system, I saw that you've created something called EduCerts. Could you talk a little bit about it? How does it work? How does it work as verifiable engagement?
Yeah, so the EDU certs are the educational certifications, which is a capability of the Unlock protocol. For us, over the past few months, has become more and more valuable because we're partnered with the TreeGens community, and we're facilitating their ambassador program for them. And so, in order to verify that people have been certified in the knowledge, and that they understand everything it means to become a TreeGens ambassador. There is a quiz functionality of it, and then there's also an interview process. So to be able to sign off and certify on those individual components of the process and be able to say, yes, you are qualified to function in this role for this community because not only have you obtained the knowledge, but you've retained the knowledge and you can put it into practical application. And then also you understand what the mission and the vision of the community are. And to have a certifying organization such as KF Media, because we are experienced in education, in my mind at least, it is a qualified replacement of, say, like a lower level college accreditation, that you find out there in the traditional education system. So the more and more we get people to start understanding this functionality as independent operators, and that, why do I need, a Harvard accreditation when I can create my own using blockchain technology? You know what I mean?
And I think it's an important point also because I mean, I've been a part of a lot of blockchain cohorts when it started coming out. I think proof of participation, I don't think that's enough, because then anybody can join, be a part of something that they don't really attend. You don't know what the learning value is. You don't know what, as an organizer or as an educator, you don't even know what your KPIs of learning and engagement are. So when you have something like this, which is more, a proof of participation in what they're learning, I would say more of proof of like knowledge set building or something like that, you can actually
Hmm.
track performance much more easily, and also it's on chain. So
Yep.
and automated, because it's not possible for people to literally go, we're not at that age where people are giving in papers and they are like self checking them, right? So
Right.
I think for
And to
digital.
kind of just add on here a little bit, if I may, to take it one
Yeah.
step further, to be able to take all that data that's produced, say, like through the EDU or educational certificate, right? And understanding that that's a lock and understanding that it's on chain, then you just have one URL that you can use for your impact reporting. And anybody who inspects your impact reporting, all they have to do is click on that one link and go to, the blockchain that you've issued these on, and scan it and verify, okay, this is the quantity of this that have been issued by KF Media, because it has a specific wallet assignment attached to an identity within the ecosystem.
Yeah, and Will, like you had earlier mentioned, you have friends in India. I don't know if you know about one of the most pressing issues that have come up in education. So we have a centralized competitive exam called
Mm,
NEET, and and it has become a worldwide issue now, because it's called the national eligibility come entrance exam, for people to appear, pass, and then they get a like a score, then they can see, okay, which grade of college they can enter. The
sure.
examination paper was leaked, I think the day before, because selling papers, so people can prepare, is unfortunately I would say a behavior that people practice here. So now
Mm,
since it's a national level exam, it's all over the all over the news. So yeah, maybe like if there are ways, then something like this would definitely be necessary, because it is participation as well as verifiability, as well as safety, trust,
hmm.
which is
Yeah.
a huge factor, where people have spent years preparing for exams which they can't give. And there are a lot of other, there's a whole dark side of Indian examination which is another conversation. So yes, this is definitely how to make digital systems more accessible to experiences that are physical.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, my next question to you is that, what is the kind of storytelling that you use with KF Media? How do you, because there's so much of technology involved, what is the
Sure.
kind of like human layer that you work into your on-chain storytelling?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So we have within our network, within our ecosystem of KF Media, and more importantly within our community, um, we have a cohort of independent content creators, and they are the storytellers, right? And some of them are guest educators that we'll bring in to do host a live learning session for our community, and they're always recorded, right? And then we're repurposing their content. So if we look at it from that layer of KF Media as an organization, we're representative of talent, we're representative of independent content creators, and we represent and honor not only their content by protecting it for them, but we also honor their authenticity when it comes to storytelling. So, we have, and I'm sure we'll get to this later when we get to the call to action. But if people are looking at the QR code and looking through our website, there is a way to join our community through our Telegram group. So, yeah, and we
Yeah,
invite
and
anybody to take a peek of what we're doing and what we're building.
yeah, would you like to share and talk a little bit more about this? Because content creation is one of the key things that, a
Mhm.
lot of people are looking at. So maybe you want to share, and talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so so one of our programs, and it is highlighted on our website. So if people are scanning the QR code and looking on our website, they can see it there. But it's called KFM Talks. So KFM Talks, the inspiration for that, and this is really where a lot of our independent content creator curation comes from. So KFM Talks is an inspiration of a TEDx style talk, but it's done more in a private setting, right, where people can feel safe and comfortable. But it's using Web3 tooling, right? So and it's 100% Web3 tooling because I feel like in um, in the conversational construct of the blockchain ecosystem, um, people feel that we may not have enough tools to get the job done. My
Yeah.
contention is we do have enough tools, and we just have a utilization challenge of finding which tool sets work well for whatever design program, and then be able to facilitate that program. So KFM Talks essentially is proof of concept that we can use 100% Web3 tooling on a program design that is content creation, that is rewarding the individual contributors and leading to monetization of their content.
What kind of Web3 tooling would you use? Just if for people who are interested to know more, and if you could talk a little bit about the incentivization also.
Sure, yeah. So, we use several Web3 tools to get this accomplished, but it all starts with and unlock protocol, right? So unlock protocol is the interest form where people can sign up. They say, yes, I'm interested in doing this program. I want to participate in this. And then we'll use, a meeting platform that's more Web3 centric, like Huddle 01, to actually do the recordings. That's actually our recording studio. And then essentially what we do, I don't know, because there is another project, well, not really project, organization out of India. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they're called the Atlantis DAO. And
Okay.
what they built is they have a Web3, basically a bounty program that they've created that you can use for in-person events or you can use for virtual events. So what we do is we bring them in through Unlock. We bring them into the studio through Huddle 01. And then we deploy a bounty for them to claim once they've completed the task of recording their video. Using Impact Miner is the app that's tied to Impact Foundry, which is part of the Atlantis DAO ecosystem. And then from there, in terms of like producing their content and making it available towards a monetization, we do that in a couple different varieties. So we use highlight.xyz because it can accept video content up to 50 megabytes
Okay.
video sizing. So we do that so this way they have their on-chain presence of their content. But we also have another storefront called Contra, which is more of a Web 2 storefront for their content so that they can drive their community. Hey, if you don't feel comfortable using, cryptocurrencies to collect my content, here's a more traditional way that you can basically own my video that I produce because it's so inspirational and impactful to you that you want to own it, right? So, yeah, that's basically in a nutshell. There's a little bit more nuanced mechanisms to go into it, but that's the high level overview of how we're
Yeah.
using Web3 tooling for this program.
Yeah. And I think I really like how each of them are connected to each other from the
Yeah.
actual content creation. I mean, it's the experience that you're building from the, let's say, huddle to the actual creation of the content to the
Hmm.
distribution. There is a layer. Also on your website, I'd seen that you've also started like this AI live tutor. uh,
Oh, yes. I'm excited
would you
about
like to
that.
add a little bit more about that?
I can. So, for those that don't know, at the end of East Denver, what was supposed to be a 6-month project ended up just being a 3-week work trip to Mexico. But when I was in Mexico, one of my best friends in Web3, if I can give a shout out here, shout out Jimmy Cohen. If you guys don't know him, get to know him because he is the founder of Tree Gens, of who we have a official partnership with. But he turned me on to an AI model, and it was an AI model because around that time everybody's talking about, oh, Claude, all these different AI things, right? That was the big
Yeah,
buzz
yeah,
around East Denver, right? And
yeah.
I started doing an inquiry and an investigation on my own, and I'm like, no, I don't want anything necessarily that's going to live inside my computer. So he turned me on to this
Exactly.
on.
That's
Yes,
exactly why I don't want to
right,
learn, or I mean get into like clawbot, because I think there is a fear also for, I don't know, I mean especially for people who are like half baked about AI, because you never know what's going to happen
right.
and how can you safeguard yourself. So I'm really happy you brought that up.
So, right. So he turned me on to this online version of Clawbot called KimiClaw. And so KimiClaw does not live in your computer. It lives
Keep
online.
law.
KimiClaw, KimiClaw, KimiClaw. So KimiClaw has its own internal Linux environment online that it lives inside of, right? And it has memory and it saves files and things like that, so you can access them at a later date. And you can create swarms if you want to for research purposes or whatever, or you can just use the KimiClaw AI assistant. So when I was in Mexico, I wanted to test the capabilities, and so I asked the AI, "What are you capable of?" And it's like, "Well, what are you thinking about?" I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking about building this AI tutor where somebody can come, they can prompt the AI, they can put in their age, they can put in their learning modality, their primary learning modality, right? Whether they're a visual learner or they're a reader, or they consume content through video and retain it that way, or if they're a kinesthetic learner, meaning they're going to be more hands-on and put it in a practical application. So I said, this is my idea. I want to build a tutor where anybody at any time can come prompt the AI and say, this is what I want to learn about today. They can input their preferred learning modality, and then the AI is going to custom create a course just for them, right? But it's also going to create a quiz, it's going to create an assessment, it's probably going to create some activities along the way for them to do some practice sessions with, right? And then at the end of the day, what is going to be the output? Well, the output is going to be, now you've got a custom course that's been created that this individual learned from based on their learning style and their needs. But who's to say there aren't other people out there that have similar needs, right? So then we take the output of that, um, and that adds to our core curriculum repository of content inside of our learning center. So within the span, I couldn't do it all in one session one day, but across 2 different sessions, um, on 2 days in the span of about 8 hours, I vibe coded, which right now locally it's living on my machine, but eventually it's not going to be once we get done with this new build on our learning center. But we
Okay.
have successfully tested and debugged, mind you, a fully functional AI tutor that we can connect to any LLM out there that has like the most comprehensive repository of information to where, yeah, at some point here soon, I say probably 30 days or less, we're going to have an AI tutor living inside of our learning center. And that's just going to be truly magical because it's going to accelerate and exponentialize our educational content in a way that we imagined could be possible if we grew to a big enough community size, but we didn't know necessarily that it would be possible this soon into our life cycle of what we're building. So,
No, and I think that's fantastic because education is something that's all it's I would say it's cross border, and
oh
you
yeah,
need to and you need to have this level of pollination across communities and people, and
hmm,
it's not possible where we don't live in that era where you're going to be constantly physically asking people for questions, so if you have
right,
some sort of a system that not only learns with you but also grows with you, can help other people, and it just feeds into that system and definitely doesn't live in your computer. I think
yeah.
I think that's the claim to fame.
Well,
And
and
yeah,
just
I think,
understand, there's a lot of proprietary information on my
yeah,
computer that I'm protecting on behalf of our content creators, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I need to ensure that the integrity of that content is protected at all costs. So,
yeah,
yeah, not
yeah,
having an AI live inside my computer is a beautiful thing, and
yeah,
having an AI out there in the wild that people can learn from, can benefit from, and then it's creating verifiable social impact, and then it's we're also deploying out the educational certificates through Unlock for the
yeah.
on-chain presence. I think it's just what a time to be alive, right?
Yeah, what a time to be alive, where I think more and more uh the need of looking at an ecosystem that is not only tech driven but also which is behavioral driven,
Mm,
that I think those have the capacity to be much more sustainable in the future, because yes, though tech lives forever, but what is the behavior, that actually creates things, will I was actually in shock. I'll have to tell you an insight that I found out recently. I don't know if you remember. So there's this very popular American singer, J-Lo, and at some point she had worn this green bluey some outfit for an event which went viral. And I didn't think the story was true. I actually googled it, and it was. And people started looking for that image of that dress. It was
mm,
actually Google Images came out because people were actually looking at finding that image of that particular dress. For
mhm,
me, yes, it's amazing that Google came out and it built Google Images. But what was more interesting to me was that, oh wow, that there is this need where people are searching, they want to know. And that's how technology facilitated that whole need. And I'm like, oh my God, so if we can actually look at things that actually have a human layer and build across to that need, problem solve, use critical thinking, which I see a lot of it that you're doing with KFM media. I think it's fantastic. But I
yeah.
never knew Google Images came out like that. It was just wow.
Wow, that's a good story. That's a really good
Yeah,
story.
that's a good story. Yeah, you've talked about a lot of unlock use cases which I see you using
Mm.
all the time. uh what if, and unlock so well, what would you want Unlock to look like in the future, or what would you add or
Ooh,
change to the way that it is? I've not asked this to anybody else, but I think I can take
right.
that onus and ask you, because I feel you're pretty in depth with Unlock.
Well, thank you for that. First off, for that compliment. What I want Unlock to look like in the future? Well, I don't know because Unlock's been around for quite some time, right? I believe Unlock even predates my Web3 journey, which started in 2020, right? So I don't know how upgradable the smart contracts are in their current iteration. Maybe it's a new iteration of smart contracts that need to be deployed to accomplish this. But I would love for Unlock, for you to be able to come to the protocol, come to the app, and be able to deploy a smart contract on chain that would have a file size that accepts video content of a gigabyte, right? That would be like my dream scenario of Unlock, to be able to upload a 1 gigabyte video onto the protocol and then be able to do whatever with it, curate it in whatever fashion needs to be curated in order to create a distribution mechanism for that video content, right? I know in its current stage it's not capable of that. That's why we use other Web 3.20 to accomplish that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's my dream scenario.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I think why I think for you, because you've been using it, I think you can look at things that have a lot of need and also build
Hmm.
your own experience into it. Um, there was a conversation I had with Stella yesterday, and she said something which really triggered a thought in me. I know Stella's listening to this. I wonder what she'd have to say. So she said, yeah, and I was like, yeah, it was to the effect that it made me think, okay, there are some layers that are for infrastructure, there are some
Hmm.
layers that are for finance, and those do really well, right?
Hmm.
For me, I see Unlock as a service protocol, not like an infrastructure protocol, not a finance protocol. Do you think that that would be something that exists for you, like seeing Unlock as a service protocol? Because it does provide a service, right? Would it make
It
sense?
does, it does, it does provide a service, but there's a lot of flexibility in the services it provides, right? It
Yeah,
goes beyond just event management and like proof of
yeah,
attendance, right?
yeah,
Um, if I may, I mean, I can show an example of kind of the financial side of unlocked protocols. So let me just share my screen real quick and see here. So this is our primary page, and hopefully this shares well on screen. Okay, so you can see our page right here, right? So there's just a few examples.
I can't see the screen.
I can see
Just
it on my end.
okay, maybe let me ask. Just okay. Do you want to just talk about it till I just figure this out?
Yeah, sure. So I can talk about
Yeah,
it. So here's an example of some of the deployments that we've done on the base chain. So viewing audience, if you can see this, you you're doing really good. So here is a subscription that we set up, which does accept USD payments, right? This is on a month-to-month basis, and it's a subscription service we set up for our learning center. So just, an example of like the financial component that is built into Unlock already. There is that component as well. And I'll stop sharing my screen here real quick. But yeah, so I would say there's already a financial component built into it. It's just figuring out what is your use case that you're going to utilize it for, right? Are you going to accept, stable coins? Are you going to accept traditional fiat payments, which can be done through a Stripe
yeah,
account? And
yeah,
most businesses nowadays do operate with the Stripe account as part of their
yeah,
financial mechanism. So I would say, service layer, yes, I agree, but there's also a financial layer component to it as well that can be implemented with Unlock Protocol. Is it like true core infrastructure? No, probably not. but it builds on the core infrastructure, right? So it's operating on a layer right above that core infrastructure. So hopefully
Okay.
that answers your question and completes that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's not
Okay.
core infrastructure. It's not core finance for me. I feel as a layer, if I have to look at, this structural layer, it's more like it's infrastructure and finance at the bottom,
Mhm.
but while you go up, it's more of the service that actually aids the other two.
Sure,
uh,
sure.
so yeah, because for me to define unlock, what is it that I would say unlock is in, let's say, two words. For me, it's always been, it's a financial, I mean, sorry, it's a service protocol that aids, finance and need and infrastructure and all of that.
Hmm.
Yeah, what an interesting conversation. I have a few more things to ask you about KF Media,
Let's
which I've
do it.
written down.
Let's do it. I'm
Um,
excited.
yeah. So there is this thing about earning impact tokens on
Oh, you're talking about
mobile.
learn for impact.
Yeah, learn from it. Oh, is it that? And also
Yeah, learn for
mentorship
impact.
opportunities. So how do these two things work? Stella, I think we don't need to share screen now because Will and my screen, it's become really small.
It's okay.
Okay.
Um, so learn for impact. I'm glad you brought that up because that's our flagship program. Oh, look at that Zoom. All right, the producer's having a field day here with this. Anyways, yes. So learn for impact is our flagship program. Okay. Now, one thing to understand about the model we're building, because we want it to be completely different than what's out there, we're not a tuition based model. Okay. We're not even a subscription based model in most cases. And in most cases, um, we're not even like an a la carte menu type model like you're going to find out there in online education ecosystem, right? We feel that it's better benefit for people to have the knowledge and the education in their hands and to be rewarded for their participation for obtaining that knowledge, right? So that being said, we I talked about it earlier in the conversation. Right now, we're focused on rebuilding our learning center because the service provider, like you're saying, service, right? Service provider that was hosting our learning center previously decided that were no longer going to be in that position to be a service provider. So we forked their original code. We've complied with their license that they had applied to the code, and now we're rebuilding our learning center. When we rebuild our learning center and it comes alive into production here in a couple of weeks, it is going to be fully open. So that means fully inclusive, and it will not be token gated. The NFTs we've issued along the way will still have other value within our community with those token holders. So if people still want to go out and mint those education passports, they can feel free to do so, and we'll give them the resources to accomplish that. But the learning center itself is going to be a fully open learning center, and it'll be a fully open community. So that means anybody can come in through the appropriate link, which is essentially going to be a subdomain of our main website right now. And they'll be able to come in, they'll be able to log in using a social login or a Web3 login, their choice. And they'll be able to set up a profile, and then they'll be able to start looking at the content that's in there. Learn for Impact is our version of a learn to earn program. So instead of them paying tuition or paying a subscription or paying for the courses, they're going to get the information that they're looking for at no cost, and then they're going to be rewarded in a meaningful way. So what does that mean? We've curated along the way ever since Gitcoin Grants 18, which I think is about 3 years ago now, a little less than 3 years ago, probably about 2.5 years ago. But based on our participation with other communities and other organizations with the ecosystem, we've accumulated some tokens. These tokens in our treasury, some of them do have monetary value assigned to them. Some of them don't. Some of them are representative of a community, right? A very specific community that they may want to explore and get involved with. Some of them or actually a good portion of them, represent impact in the real world. So they're real world assets, right? Whether they're carbon credits or whether they're biochar credits or whether it's clean water initiative that these tokens are representative of. The four criteria that we define impact tokens, or the four categories, I should say, does it make an impact to the environment? Yes. Okay, cool. Does it make an impact socially? So basically a social impact token. It does. Okay, cool. Does it make an impact at the societal level? Okay, cool. And does it make an impact monetarily? Right. So from a financial perspective. So we have this blend and balance of tokens that we've collected along the way. And we use some of our fundraising that we've done to acquire these tokens as well and to build up this treasury. So this way, when they come in, they complete a course, they're rewarded in a token that's assigned to that course. Maybe it's Azos stablecoin, right? Maybe it's Glow Dollar, maybe it's just standard ETH, right? Whatever it is, they're going to be the beneficiary and the recipient of these tokens that are in our treasury, so that they can also feel good about themselves. Now, there is a little bit of science behind this, so let me just tell you the science behind it. So, because we did some research about this, because we wanted it to be unique. So, the science behind it, for those that don't know, is that there's a psychological effect when you learn something that produces a chemical release in your brain called dopamine. Also, when you are willingly participating in altruistic efforts, which is what the Learn for Impact represents, it's a program of altruism. It produces another chemical in your brain called acetylcholine, also known as ACH. So the combined effects of a simultaneous release of dopamine and acetylcholine has one of the most profound positive euphoric responses the brain is capable of. So that's just based on the research we've done. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not, I'm not certified to make any other claims outside of just the information that I'm aware of. But yeah, I think it's something that through time will prove to um, you know maybe the whole of humanity is in a better place because of learned impact, or at least I'd like to think that that would be the case. So
Oh, that's fantastic. I think learn from impact, and especially the scientific, analogy, which I am going to use in my next call for sure. Because I think it's important today that we're all learning. Like, as soon as Claude came in, what did people do? The reason why it exploded is because, exactly like you said, those two triggers of dopamine and the other one, it had a reaction and it had a
mhm,
positive effect because you were learning on the way, and you were creating
mhm,
that innovation happen, right? And I think especially for Web3, for which I think hugely lacked in our previous cycle, is that we didn't build for adoption. It was only built for people who knew enough, but because adoption is a lot of work, for newbies who are, to bring in that, and maybe that is a scope will you can definitely look at through your program is, and I think it's so needed now because people are still constantly building, right? How many people are adopting into a new system, and especially a new
right,
financial system?
right.
Because finance is money, but it's a very emotional construct. If you
Oh, it
don't,
is.
you don't know, you don't play around with
Mhm,
money, right? So Web3 has that, and your educational ecosystem can, actually aid, this, and it's a great place because people are so if I can give you ask you as an example, today, let's say if I'm building a project, right, and there is a component where I need to train people about how they can use Web3 for this product. As let's say a person wants to be a part of this ecosystem, how would it work for me? Would I come to you and create? Would you help me create the videos, or would you? How would it work? Or is
as
there
a
a
product.
No, as not as a product, but as a learning scope or something. I
Okay.
don't know. Yeah, both
Okay.
as a product as well as a learning scope.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you know nothing about blockchain technology. You know nothing about Web3. You know nothing about what the fulfillment of the prophecy is going to be through time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's
Awesome.
one use case. Or the other
Right.
use case that I know, but I need to tell my users about it because they don't know,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right. I love it. I love it. Okay, so here's where we start, right? Our first conversation is not about the financial implications or the financial possibilities within the ecosystem. Our first conversation is understanding the technology and the ecosystem. Okay, that's very basic, very rudimentary. That's the first conversation we're going to have. Also, we're going to point them towards tools that are going to aid in reducing as much friction as possible in the onboarding process, right? And while there's not a universal solution yet out there, there are ones that do work very well across different regions in terms of like wallet setups, right? So the first thing
Yeah,
we're going to do is we're going to have a sit down conversation. It can be in a group environment, it can be a one on one, or say, look, this is what the blockchain technology is at the center of Web3. Okay, you've probably heard about Web3. It's the next version of the internet,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
But blockchain technology is at the center of that. So, in order to understand the technology, you need to understand basically how it works and basically what it provides. That's different than what's out there in the age of the internet right now, right? So that's the first step, and then they can go a little bit, peel back the layers of the onion a little bit, and start understanding about the certain nuances inside the ecosystem. And then, of course, we're going to provide them with a solution that gets them in the ecosystem, uh, gets them a little bit of skin in the game, so they can at least have access to other things that they're going to need access to. And we do that. And so I'm glad you brought this up because this speaks to our other two programs that we have. So we have two other programs that are our Pathways programs. And our Pathways program are very much designed for this. And it's to do it by hosting in person events, by hosting local citizens who, like you said, know nothing about the technology, they know nothing about the experience, they know nothing about, the vision of what's to come in the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years, and how they're going to be participating whether they know it or not, right? So yeah, that's our specific approach. Now if they want to have a conversation about financial implications later on down the road, once they have that very basic understanding, then we're more than happy to entertain those conversations as well.
yeah,
But by removing the financial aspect immediately, I feel it does a very good job of level setting expectations. They're like, oh, I'm not here necessarily to make financial gains. While that could be a benefit of my participation, my primary focus is to start building a reputation inside these communities that I'm aligned with and that I have a like mindedness towards their mission and their vision.
yeah. And I think that there is a key opportunity in this also, because I feel what, I don't know, I'm looking at it from a completely, from a strategic, like a systems design thinking
Mm-hmm.
perspective. What I felt the protocols lacked also is that they created the infrastructure and all of that, and they gave it out to people and they started building. These people who were builders didn't have time enough to, they were actually only looking for those people who already knew. They were not looking at people who didn't know. And there
Mm-hmm.
is a whole other community that doesn't know, and now they don't
Right.
have the time to educate people who don't know. So that's when a program like yours can easily fit in, saying, hey, you don't have the time, we know what we're doing, we can actually help you implement your use cases into other, use cases,
Mm-hmm.
which can make it accessible. And
Right.
I think that's, because I think education again really needs to come back for Web3. It was quite big, I think about a year or two ago.
I
And
I would say it really hit its peak about the time that we came on the scene that we started building. So about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
education
Yeah.
of this really did. But you also remember, say, like 4 years ago, there was a whole social narrative of like, why do we need mass adoption? What we have here is special. We want to hold on to this experience as much as possible, right? So there was that whole social narrative that was going through the blockchain
But it's
ecosystem
not
of like,
inclusive.
I know it's not inclusive. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We've evolved and we've
Yeah.
matured beyond that. But
Yeah.
that was the narrative at the time. Was like,
Yeah.
we don't. Why do we need mass adoption? We don't
Yeah.
want mass adoption. We want to hold on to what's special here now. And it's like, yeah, but that's not really realistic. It's not really sustainable, right? If regardless of it. And so then that's when the layer two solutions started popping up, and
Yeah.
we started seeing those evolve and maturing. And
Yeah.
now the one thing that I've been banging the drum for 5 years on is that if we truly want mass adoption of this technology, um, then then the technology or the solutions built on the technology have to be simple, right? When I was working at that consulting gig that I was telling you about when I first came in this ecosystem, right? We had a saying: if soccer mom, and I think this is a global narrative that everybody can relate with. So I know not everybody calls it soccer. Only in the U.S. we call it soccer, but other countries are adapting to our verbiage. But if the moms who are supporting their kids in athletic events, if it takes them more than 3 clicks to get to the solution, they're not going to do it,
Yeah.
right? So it's understanding that mindset, especially in this age of instant gratification, is that if it takes me more than 3 steps to get into the blockchain ecosystem, then I'm probably going to lose interest very fast. So
Yeah.
simplicity, frictionless, or as much reduced friction as possible to get to that 3 click point for a new user, I think is critically important as we're starting navigating forward. And we're starting to see that manifest itself within the ecosystem.
I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of food for thought there,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a lot of room to grow. I think education is something that we, it's generational. It comes back to us in different forms. So, yeah. And so, as one of my last questions, which I ask all my hosts, so all my guests, um, what would you be telling your future self, Will?
What will I be telling my future self? You know, that's a great question, and that's very difficult to answer because I live my life to fulfill my purpose and my passions in the now, right? Um, yeah, I don't know. It said there was connection lost on my end, but we're back. So, anyways, we're getting a note from the producer. We probably got to wrap this up pretty soon. But what I will say is, you know, I hope you've enjoyed the ride because it's been a beautiful journey. How about that? Are you still with me, Anupa? Okay.
I think maybe Will is having
I'm good now. I'm
some
good now.
internet issues.
No, not on my end.
Hey guys, can
Hey,
you hear
what's up?
me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you. I can
Anupa
also
can't
hear
hear me,
Anupa.
but she cannot
Uh,
hear me.
no, she cannot hear either of us, sadly.
Will, can you hear me? Okay.
You cannot.
So I was saying, as one of my last questions to all my guests, what is the future? What is the message that you would like to ask your futures or give or tell your future self?
I hope you've enjoyed the ride because it's been a beautiful journey.
That's really, really nice. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I think this is a fantastic conversation. I've had a lot of thoughts, which I'm going to write in our chat, because I see, especially with the AI tutor, maybe that can help us at Unlock also, because we have a lot of, education stuff coming up. So, yeah, maybe it
Yeah.
might be interesting to see how
Well,
it
the
goes.
beautiful thing about it is because we've built this ourselves using AI, right? We can do a lot with the code set. We can open source it if we want to.
Yeah,
We can repurpose it for other communities. We can customize it. That's going to suit their needs. So that's going to give us
yeah,
a lot of leverage in the
yeah.
ecosystem,
For sure.
especially when we start our next fundraising campaign. So,
Yeah,
well,
exactly. Stella, maybe for incented. That's why I was like putting it into the chat. Yeah, we can definitely talk about it later. Okay, thank
hey,
you, Will, for joining.
my pleasure.
And yeah,
Have a great day.
yeah, have a great day. Stella, do you want to pop up and say hi?